Maglio. Shit! Sorry. We gotta get moving. What? They found another body. Only on my lunch hour.
Disconnected is a low-budget psychological thriller with horrible production values. It looks like crap, it sounds like crap, the actors can't act very well, and the only gore is fake blood sprinkled around the set. You would think I didn't like it, and I didn't very much at first. I'd watched it once and written it off as one of many forgettable 80s horror flicks that didn't want any further attention. But something about it stuck with me. I don't know if it was the catchy soundtrack, the odd tone, the peculiar ending, or something else, but I eventually decided to watch it again. And while I watched it the second time, I kinda got into it. It's a self-aware horror movie that does something kinda different. It has an interesting Italian horror vibe going on and a reverence for cinema that bleeds through the director. Don't get me wrong, this is no Suspiria, but if you're watching horror movie reviews on YouTube, Disconnected is a unique horror movie that you might want to give a look. Gorman Bechard directed this wonderful mess of a movie, and apart from a lengthy hiatus that began in the late 80s, one that draws a very clear distinction in his output, he's still producing movies today, mostly documentaries. Disconnected was his first feature film and is very much in the vein of his earlier work, movies that included Psychos in Love, about two serial killers trying to make a relationship work.
Then I found out she liked grapes. I'm a psycho killer.
Huh?
I'm a mad slasher. I kill people.
I don't believe it.
What?
Me too!
Galactic Gigolo, where an alien wins a game show for which the prize is a trip to Earth for sex with as many women as possible.
Local residents report that they have seen an alien life form in the surrounding woods.
Let's get him!
Oh my God, Eon!
Hey, here, Lisa. Hey, here, Lucy. And here, Lori. Then I must be the extraterrestrial.
You have an extra testicle?
Look, I won this trip on a game show. Earth's got a good rep in space. What can I tell you?
A good rep?
Yeah, you know, the best-looking women, the smoothest bourbon.
And Assault of the Killer Bimbos, which follows a group of women on the run killing every bozo along the way.
Go-go dancers? The go-go happens to be a highly respected classical art form. It's interpretive dance in a rock and roll format. In bikinis.
Hold those!
What? Didn't I tell you never to use that word around me?
Hold this. It's your tip, sweetheart.
Oh no, a bimbo with a gun.
It's car 19er in hot pursuit of the killer bimbo.
Disconnected isn't as silly and doesn't have as clear a hook as any of those movies. In short, it's about a woman who falls for the wrong guy and is tormented until she loses her mind, but that's not doing it justice. In Long, it's about Alicia. She's in a relationship with Mike. Mike is cheating on her with her own twin sister, Barbara Ann, possibly unbeknown to him. Horror fans may recognize her from The Mutilator and a few other low-budget horror flicks from the 80s. Alicia just so happens to pick Franklin, the friendly neighborhood serial killer, as her rebound. Franklin is played by a much younger Mark Walker and is the most notable member of the cast, but not of the film's production. Franklin comes across as a complete weirdo, socially awkward and kind of creepy. He's the guy doing magic tricks at the bar to impress a woman, and he shows up at the video store where Alicia works after eavesdropping on her conversation at that bar. Their exchange is uncomfortable to watch.
I watch this every time it's on TV. God, all these movies. You don't seem to have too many foreign films, though. Well, you got a lot of horror and a lot of new stuff.
Franklin seems harmless, and Alicia wants to get over her cheating boyfriend. She agrees to go on a date with him, and they kinda hit it off. At the same time, there are two bumbling detectives searching for a serial killer. One of the detectives is played by Carmine Copobianco, a regular in Beach's earlier flicks who is still making appearances in micro-budget horror movies like this year's Mind Melters, a horror anthology by Slock master James Balsamo. Their search is relevant because it's revealed Franklin is a murderer when he receives a call from Alicia. He rolls over in bed to answer the telephone, and the body of a woman lies in the bed next to him. I don't want to think about what he does with those dead bodies, and since we aren't shown in any great detail, I fortunately didn't have to see it. But I'm sure it's unpleasant. Coinciding with the beginning of her new relationship, Alicia starts receiving peculiar phone calls and having vivid nightmares, the especially cinematic kind where you wake up in your dream but you're still asleep. So creepy things that don't logically flow with a story can happen to create an artificial sense of dramatic weight, you know.
Mike, what the hell are you doing here? So Barbara Ann threw you out, huh? Say something, damn it! She looks so peaceful. Now I have you all to myself. No!
Alicia and Franklin's relationship is going well, and she even escapes one attempt at her life without realizing she was ever in danger. I assumed Disconnected was going to follow the standard thriller structure where the suspense keeps building and building until the final climax, where Alicia overcomes Franklin in a bloody battle to the death. But Bechard had something else up his sleeve. Alicia doesn't take out Franklin in a climactic third-act battle. The bumbling detectives do it at the end of the second act. They happen to be walking by his house when they hear Alicia scream after walking in on the aftermath of Barbara Ann's murder. Yep, Franklin kills Barbara Ann when she shows up to his house to seduce him. Seems she made a habit of getting it on with Alicia's lovers. But she's certainly got her comeuppance, and then some. You may be thinking it's a bit convenient for the detectives to happen by just as Alicia is about to meet her demise. And it is, but their presence in the neighborhood is established in an earlier scene.
Come to the point that we might have to go door to door and just, question everybody.
That's not a bad idea. Even the mayor's been on our backs.
They even cross paths with Franklin indirectly in one scene as they hassle someone else who seems suspicious. I was left stunned and clueless as to where the story would go after Franklin's death, but I wrote it out and was rewarded with an interesting third act. The weird phone calls Alicia's receiving don't stop when Franklin dies. I was under the impression that he was behind them, though it's never expressly stated that he was. She just doesn't begin receiving them until she gives Franklin her phone number, which is some decent sleight of hand on Bechard's part. I have to take a moment to point out that, just like with Frogs, the last movie I reviewed, the scripts aren't actually the problems with these movies. It's honestly refreshing watching older movies, even when they aren't that good, because the craft and effort is apparent. Unlike with lazy modern Hollywood output where they begin productions without even having finished scripts. I may have to go into that further in a future video. But back to this movie. If Franklin wasn't making the increasingly bizarre calls, then who is? The creepy guy from the video store?
What do you got new in porn?
The cheating boyfriend? Or some other culprit? The remainder of the movie follows Alicia's slow descent into madness, which is understandable considering she was having sex with a serial killer, one that murdered her twin sister. While Alicia is mourning her bad decisions and the death of her sister, she hears on the radio that another serial killer is on the loose, one that torments his victims with threatening phone calls preceding their deaths. This news nearly pushes her to the brink, and she resorts to drinking excessively and dreading the ring of the telephone until, well, we'll get into that in a bit. Despite its super low budget and the inexperience of the director, Disconnected is kind of ambitious, if amateurish. It was shot on a $40,000 budget while Bechard studied film, and it does play like a student film, but a decent one. Bechard plays around with camera movement and editing techniques to varying degrees of effectiveness. You already saw the tracking shot in the bar earlier in this video that leads to Franklin's reveal. In another early scene, Alicia confronts her boyfriend about sleeping with Barbara Ann, which he, of course, denies. The camera pans back and forth between the two, a visual representation of their verbal back and forth. It's a neat little trick that makes the scene more interesting to watch than a static shot or cutting between the two actors would have. Bechard plays with the lighting in the scene to less desirable effect. Alicia is way overlit, and her boyfriend is underlit in an attempt to show the split in their relationship and putting Mike clearly in the wrong, but it just doesn't look good on screen. In a later scene, when the two briefly reconnect and things are going well, they use the same shot again. This time they are both overlit, which indicates they're on the same page. Bechard did have good ideas. He just wasn't able to execute them all very well. He uses editing to enhance the mood and pacing of certain sequences too. There are several quick cuts and shots of creepy knickknacks that create an unsettling tone. This is a useful cinematic device, but is also interesting because the scenes in Alicia's home were shot in Bechard's own apartment, so these are conceivably items he owned before even shooting the movie. I guess he was a Groucho Marx fan. The items themselves, creepy porcelain figurines, a little wooden pendulum clock, Hitchcock movie posters, an old radiator, combined with the technique, add to the surreal feel of the movie. I mentioned earlier that it had an Italian horror movie vibe. What I meant by that was the surreal tone and looser structure of the movie. Italian horror movies tended to focus more on themes, visuals, and atmosphere than plot, story, and character. Disconnected finds a better balance than the average Italian horror film from around that time, but he was probably a fan of them. The thing that drew Italian horror films to my mind first was the actors' voices seemed to be dubbed. It's the real actors' voices, but not recorded on set. Maybe because of the quality of the equipment, or maybe it was a deliberate choice. I don't know. I could be wrong about this, but their words and their mouths don't sync up perfectly. This really detracts from the already weak performances, but does add a layer of surrealism to the movie. One thing I really enjoyed about Disconnected was its soundtrack. I've come to love 80s pop music over the past few years, and while none of the songs on the soundtrack were hits, they have that distinctly 80s sound. 3 songs were provided by a little-known band called The Excerpts. I found myself singing along to their #1 hit by the movie's end because it plays a couple of times throughout. The director must have liked their music too because he uses it to pad out the movie's 84-minute runtime. The Excerpts were fronted by John Brion, who later went on to become a successful producer and film composer, most known for his collaborations with Paul Thomas Anderson in films like Punch Drunk Love and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This probably makes him the most notable member of the cast and crew. But now it's time to discuss Alicia's fate. Drunk and anxious and cowering in her apartment on the edge of insanity, she reaches her limit when blood pours from the telephone speaker. She smashes the phone to bits. The catharsis of destroying the means of her harassment seems to bring a sense of calm over her, but it is only temporary. A few moments pass before the sounds from the phone return, but now it comes from inside the room. She snaps around to see, well, we can only assume what she saw. The film cuts to black. The final scene is an exterior shot of her apartment, and guess who exits? It's the old man from the beginning of the movie. It wasn't a very memorable scene. It plays under the credits, and the sound is muted to one of those catchy 80s tunes I was just talking about. She lets the old man, played by Bechard's grandfather, into her home to use the phone, leaving him alone while she messes about in the kitchen. When she returns to the living room, the man is gone and the phone is left off the hook. We don't see the old man again for the duration of the movie, and he is only mentioned once in the following scene.
It was so strange. I mean, he just disappeared. I went to fix some tea, and then I came back, and he was gone. I don't another disabled dog. Oh, Alicia, you're beginning to sound more like Mother every day. He obviously just made his phone call and left.
When the final scene does roll around, we come to understand that this man, or whatever he is, was the one behind all of the creepy phone shenanigans. He never left the apartment. This is jarring, but in a good way. It took me a second or two to wrap my head around the fact that he was some kind of supernatural being capable of hiding in the wiring of a telephone where he would torment his victims near to the point of insanity before murdering them. It's a surprise ending that is well set up. If I was trying, I could have guessed or figured it out. I was just too hung up on the guy trying to buy porn at the video store.
What do you got new in porn?
There's a shot at the end as the man walks down the stairs and turns to look directly at the camera. Then the image freezes. It's like the director basking in the glow of his trickery. A cinematic mic drop, if you will. It was my favorite moment of the movie and sent me away with a surprised grin on my face. And that is disconnected. If it had ended any other way, I wouldn't have made this video and likely would have never given it a second thought. It's not a great movie. It drags at times and some of the details are left unclear. Like if Mike intentionally cheated on Alicia and what that slap was all about. But it saves itself, for me, in the end. The antagonist dying in the second act kind of wobbled me, but the final reveal knocked me on my rear. It's fun being taken for a ride, and Bechard was able to do just that. Anyway, I look forward to checking out Bechard's other movies. Cycles in Love is streaming on Amazon. I plan to get to it soon. And if you haven't, you should give Disconnected a watch.